The Rise and Fall of the Berlin Wall, a story of division and unity.
August 13th, 1961, a day that changed Berlin forever. In the dead of night, a concrete barrier began to snake its way through the heart of the city, cutting families, friends, and a nation in two. This is the story of the Berlin Wall, a brutal symbol of division, but also of resilience and, ultimately, unity. To understand the wall, we first have to rewind a bit. It's 1945. The Second World War has ended, and Germany lies in ruins. The Allies, America, Britain, France, and the Soviet Union, divide the country into 4 occupation zones. But this uneasy alliance soon falls apart as tensions between the West and the Soviet Union begin to rise. The Cold War has begun.
Berlin, located deep inside the Soviet-controlled East Germany, is also split into sectors. The western part, controlled by the Allies, becomes a thriving symbol of democracy. The East, under Soviet control, becomes part of the growing communist bloc. For years, people freely crossed between the two sides, living and working in different sectors. But that would soon change. Khrushchev, the Soviet premier, famously said, "Berlin is the testicle of the West. When I want the West to scream, I squeeze Berlin." And squeeze they did. Between 1949 and 1961, nearly 3 million East Germans fled to the West, seeking freedom and better economic opportunities. This mass exodus was a disaster for the East German government. It was losing its skilled workers, teachers, and engineers at an alarming rate.
Then came the night of August 13, 1961. Without warning, East German soldiers began erecting barbed wire and concrete blocks, dividing the city overnight. Imagine waking up and suddenly finding yourself separated from your job, your friends, or even your family, without any idea if you'd ever see them again.
One of the elderly Berliners said, "I went to bed thinking I lived in one city. I woke up in a prison." The wall wasn't just one barrier. It was a deadly system of fences, guard towers, and landmines designed to keep East Germans from escaping. The most infamous part was the death strip, where guards had shoot-to-kill orders. Over the next 28 years, at least 140 people would die trying to cross the wall, although many believe the true number is higher.
Families were torn apart. For nearly 3 decades, the wall stood as a harsh reminder of the Cold War's human cost. But even in the darkest times, there were stories of hope and defiance. Take the story of the Tunnel 29. In 1962, a group of university students dug a tunnel under the wall, 12 meters deep and over 100 meters long. In an incredible act of courage, they smuggled 29 people from east to west, evading detection and gunfire. One of the students involved later said, "We weren't heroes. We were just desperate for freedom."
Internationally, the wall became a flashpoint. In 1963, U.S. President John F. Kennedy visited West Berlin, standing just a few feet away from the wall itself. His famous words would echo around the world: "All free men, wherever they may live, are citizens of Berlin. And therefore, as a free man, I take pride in the words, Ich bin ein Berliner." Kennedy's speech wasn't just a show of support for Berlin. It was a defiant message to the Soviet Union that the West would not abandon this outpost of freedom.
But as the Cold War dragged on, something changed. By the 1980s, cracks were beginning to form, not just in the wall, but in the Soviet bloc itself. East Germans grew bolder in their protests. By 1989, the communist grip on Eastern Europe was loosening as uprisings and reforms swept through countries like Poland and Hungary. Honecker, the hardline East German leader, famously declared, "The wall will stand for another 100 years." But he couldn't have been more wrong.
November 9, 1989. In one of the most dramatic moments of the 20th century, a botched announcement by an East German official lit the spark. The government had intended to announce slight easing of travel restrictions, but the message was misinterpreted as immediate, unrestricted travel. Thousands rushed to the border checkpoints, demanding to be let through. At first, the border guards were unsure what to do. Then, just after 10:30 p.m., they opened the gates. The wall was breached. East and West Berliners flooded into each other's arms in scenes of pure, unfiltered joy.
Journalist Tom Brokaw, who was reporting live from the scene, described the moment as the biggest story of my life, an incredible moment of history. The wall, that terrible symbol of division, was finally coming down.
In the days that followed, Berliners took matters into their own hands, chipping away at the wall with hammers and chisels. What had once divided a city and a world was now being torn down by the very people it sought to separate. Today, little remains of the Berlin Wall, save for a few memorials and stretches left standing as a reminder. But its legacy lives on, not as a symbol of division, but of hope, resilience, and the power of people to overcome even the most formidable barriers.
As Ronald Reagan famously said in 1987, just 2 years before the wall came down, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." It was a demand not just for the demolition of a concrete structure, but for the end of an era of fear and oppression. The Berlin Wall stood for nearly 3 decades, but in the end, it fell, not because of armies or politicians, but because of people. The wall is gone, but the story of its rise and fall will always remind us of the human spirit's unbreakable desire for freedom.